Being recorded, yeah, very nice.
Yes. Okay. Hello. Hello, fellow web dev backend students and or those who are watching this asynchronously. Today we have a guest lecture, as I've stated in the Slack several times. We'll be learning Django today. We have Armaan here who's going to be teaching, and same protocol questions. If you have questions, ask them in the chat or just interrupt. And Armaan, you can introduce yourself and take it away.
Very nice. You guys can still hear me and see the screen? Cool. All right. Hello, I'm Armaan. Here's a nice default picture of me. Friend of the club, and here to give a short presentation on Django. So hopefully you guys enjoy. Logistically, yeah, Vicky, you mentioned it. We are going to be walking through some stuff. So I think just like if you have like big breaking issues, just kind of hold them off till the end, so we don't like kind of derail the rest of the presentation. But if you have like short questions, feel free to pop in and ask them. I think someone just joined, so I'll send the slides again. But there's some links at the bottom that we're going to use throughout the presentation. So yeah, let's get into it. So introduction. So what is Django? Django is a Python-based backend framework. And the Python-based aspect of it is pretty nice in my opinion, because Python, you guys probably have all learned it or will learn it through 61A, if you guys are CS, data science, etc. And it's just like a very popular language. So there's a ton of stuff built out for it. So it's just a really nice language to be using. You can do things like TensorFlow for machine learning, OpenCV, like data science, NumPy, like pandas, etc. All the stuff you're familiar with, like things like list comprehension and stuff, all work in Django. So it's pretty nice to use. And specifically, you guys are a web dev club, so like, why are we doing it? Well, I know you guys like to use React, so we can use Django to build REST APIs that'll work with a React front end. So that's really nice. So it'll integrate nicely with a front end. And just, I'm sure you guys probably know what a backend is, but just to review, we have our client right here. You guys can see the mouse, right? If I'm pointing to things. Yeah, we'll do that. Very nice. So we have a client which is running, like in this case, let's think about React code. It'll make some requests to our server here, our REST API, which is going to run Django. That'll, process this and then maybe interact with the database, like write some data, read some data, and then it'll respond back here. And then we can process that response and send a nice clean JSON response to the front end in React. So yeah, it's definitely very important. You guys like, Vicky, they've like learned backend stuff, right? Like they get the basics of it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just some basics. So here, let's go kind of go through the slides while we're going through the code. So if you guys don't mind opening up this website called Python Anywhere, it's pretty nice. Instead of having you guys download starter code and worry about like Django and Python versions, there's this website called Python Anywhere. I guess we'll just take like maybe 3 minutes to like make an account. It shouldn't be that long, but you just make an account here, and then you want to make a beginner account. It'll give you like a free website that you guys can use. Yeah, so I'll just go incognito just to kind of show the way it works, because I already made an account right here. So you can just go to pythonanywhere.com, start running in Python less than a minute. It says beginner account free. So we'll click that, and then you create your account. And once you've done created it, you'll be brought to this dashboard page. Yeah, appreciate it, Vicky. Yeah, just send in chat when you're done. Once most people have done it, we'll move on. Thanks, Aditya. Appreciate it. Aditya, I think you were looking really nice on Halloween. I think it'd really, if you could maybe send a little picture of what you looked like then, I think it would really lighten the mood here. Oh yeah, the onions. Someone knows what it looked like.
He's gone, unfortunately, but I was contemplating sending that to the social chat, but I needed to ask for his permission first. So I'll let you know.
Prefer to send them one of me. This chat. Well, they wouldn't. Yes. Yeah, the social chat, they wouldn't know who I am. But yeah.
Yeah, all 54 members.
Yeah, maybe not that. How do I use it? Well, we'll show you. Just stay on the dashboard page for now, and we'll go from there. Good work though. Thanks, Vic. Just wait a couple minutes. Remember, just like send something in the chat when you're done. It should be pretty quick. So, are you guys stuck on anything, or just haven't had a chance to send it in the chat? Thanks, Anusha. Here, I'm gonna send the link in the chat just so it's convenient. That way, you guys are not digging for it. Or here, send the full link. No confusion. I think Jarek just joined. Jarek, I sent a link in the, I don't think that it has link history or it's chat history, right? So Jasmine's done. Okay, I think probably at this point, you think we're good to go? It's just a one-step sign-up process. You think we're sure? All right, I think we can probably move forward. Just let me know if you guys get stuck, and just stop me in between because I can just help you for like a minute. It's no big deal. So yeah, so we're on this Python Anywhere. I believe Python Anywhere allows you to host like a lot of different Python stuff, but specifically we're going to host Django. So we're going to want to go over to this web tab where Django is a web app. It's like another way to kind of say backend like application. And we're going to add a new web app. And they give you like a nice little domain name. So it'll be nice. You guys can reference it after we're done here and add to it whatever you guys want. And yeah, Django, as you might think, Python 3.8. And we can just call it my site. That's fine, whatever it is. So yeah, this will start a new Django project. And yeah, like I said, we're going to use this online tool here, but it's like pretty much identical. Like, you know, you're going to have to run some like terminal commands to like, you're going to have to download Django using pip and stuff if you were to do it locally, but this is just for the convenience of not having to worry about that. Yeah, so here we have a website. You guys can open your link and you can see we have like kind of the boilerplate Django stuff, which is, you know, if you see this, it means it worked. That's nice. And yeah, we'll just kind of run from there. So kind of giving a tour of some of the files that we have so far. It's basically just, okay, so by the way that this file system works is kind of annoying. It separates your directories and your files. So even if your directory isn't listed here, it's like over here. So it's like a little misleading because it's not in one list. But you want to go under, like, if you called it my site, it's just my site. You'll see that there's one file here, manage.py. And then we have my site. And yeah, so we have some different files in here and we'll kind of look through them. So we're starting with settings. Basically settings is just contains all the settings for the project as Python variables, which is kind of weird. Like it just literally has like a Python variable for each thing and it stores some stuff. Whoops. And yeah, there's a lot of different stuff in here, and like there's some more advanced things like you can set up like how your templates work, different things. But we're really not going to worry about this, like even like time zone and stuff. But really the one thing we want to worry about is this installed apps. We're not going to touch this now, but basically every Django application has like different apps that you create. So we're going to want to create an app for this. You need to have like at least one app for it to work. And the idea is that you can like add, take like existing apps and like maybe like an authentication app, like they have some different stuff here. You can kind of integrate them in so that you have like some common like features that you may want to share between different projects. But for now, we're just going to create one application. But we'll do that in a sec. So that's our settings file. Like we're not going to really play with that except like one time here. So settings is just like, you know, just like on your phone settings, you don't really play with that a lot, right? But yeah, the other thing here that we're going to look at is URLs. So this kind of like maps all of the, you know, if you think about when you go on a different website, like there's the domain, which is like the core part of the like path to a particular piece of information. And then there's like the slash, and then there's stuff after that, right? So you can go to like google.com/something, right? And it'll have different things depending on what's after that slash, but the core like server you're talking to is google.com. It's just different like kind of paths, right? So URLs will kind of help us define that. Basically, it's a file that'll contain all the URL paths for the website. And like I said, it doesn't deal with a domain name. So you can like have one Django project and host it on a different domain name, and we won't need to change the URLs. Like the slash part will be the same. We'll just change the domain. And you just provide a path and a destination. So it's kind of like a hash map, basically. You give it the path, you give it which function you're going to call when you go on that path. And then we can also pass some arguments, which we'll see a little bit later. But yeah, and here's like a little example. Basically, just for a path like that's like /home/. If we want to call the function views.home, which we'll see in a bit how that is defined. But basically, it's like here's the path we're on and what's the logic we want to call. So here's the path, here's the logic we want to call. We'll see what that logic looks like later. Same thing here, here's the path. You can see that we have like a little bit of an interesting format here. This basically allows us to pass information into the function here. So you can imagine like, like think about like the New York Times website, right? Like they have a ton of different articles, a ton of different stories that they're publishing every day. They probably don't want some guy to like sit and have to update the URLs like definition every time and like have a massive list of URLs. So instead of actually like explicitly defining every like website or every article rather, you can pass in like the like part of it and then basically have the logic here like actually handle figuring out what specifically to serve. So in that case, like it'll probably like look at what you give it and like look into the database and use SQL to do a query and figure out like what specific like content to send. So we'll look at like what that actually looks like a little bit later, but this basically allows us to kind of have like a kind of a template for what our URL will look like, and we can pass in information for the function to then handle like what specifically to display. Yeah, and you'll see over here, same URLs. Right now it's just this admin thing, which don't really worry about admin. It's like a nice thing that Django gives us, but we're not going to really play with it today. Thanks, Justin. Yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and start and like make a basic hello world output. Like we still have, as you guys saw, right now this is what our website looks like. It's this boilerplate, but first thing we want to do is replace that with some of our own logic to make sure that it works. So the way we're going to do that is we actually need to create an app, and to do that we'll go into our dashboard and go and create a new Python terminal, new console rather. So this is just like opening your own local terminal, or in this case, we're kind of SSH'd into Python Anywhere's like servers. So you can see here, like we can ls just like normal. Vicky, I assume that they've learned some basic terminal stuff, right?
I'm not sure if we've learned command line. So I think just explain like the basic stuff would be helpful.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So command line will we're just gonna do like a little bit in this, so we're not gonna go too crazy. Don't be scared of this, but ls just lists what files we have, So here we have a README file as well as this, which is actually a folder. Sorry, what file are we running? Yeah, so we're actually not running a file, but we're running our console. So if you go over to dashboard and create a new bash console, or if you already have a bash console here, you can only create one. So just create on the bash one here. So just click on that, and then that'll bring you to this page. Onset, does that help? Awesome. Yeah, so basically we're gonna look at what we have here. If we type in ls, that'll list everything. You'll notice that when we created our website, it was called my site, right? So here we go, we have my site here. So in order to kind of if you use Mac or Windows, like the Finder or the File Explorer, like you can kind of double click on a folder, right, to open it. So the equivalent of like double clicking to open a folder is cd, which is change directory. So we'll cd into my site. And now you'll see like we're, instead of just being at our like base path, we're at /my site. So we're like kind of one file in, right? And if we ls here, you'll notice all these are here, just to kind of like make sure we're all on the same page. You'll notice that if we go to files, like we see the same stuff here. So if you go to my site, you'll see my media, my site static, and manage.py. And then over here, same stuff as over here. So it's just like a term, it's like a command line interface for the exact same like files. And what we need to do is we need to create our like first application to actually like run this, like to make it like a proper Django project. We need to have one application. So what we're going to do is we have this manage.py kind of like Python file, and it allows us to like run some different commands. So if we do Python 3 manage.py, and then if we do start app, this will create an application, and we have to give it a name. So I just like to name it server, which is kind of like the logic to our server. We hit that, you'll notice if I ls, we have a new folder here called server. And also if we go to here, refresh, boom, new folder called server. So let's kind of look at what's in here. We have, a views.py file, which we're going to talk about right here. And then models, which we're also going to talk about, and some other stuff, but don't really worry about that for now. But yeah, is everyone still following along here? Just a couple commands there. Cool. Yeah, so the first thing we want to do, like I said, just to go back, is we want to kind of make a, currently this is our website. We want to make it just kind of a hello world boilerplate. So what we're going to do in order to accomplish that is we're going to create a new kind of path for just a hello world response. So if you remember, over here, it's like a dictionary. So here's where there's the kind of path, and here's the function we're calling. So we're going to enter the path. Let's just do slash, or I think we can just do empty quotes. And that'll basically just be like our root path. So it'll kind of replace what we have here. Like there's nothing after that. There's nothing here, right? Like slash admin will do this admin path, which is defined here. But we're just going to kind of replace this page, which is like our home page, right? So we don't need to put anything in the quotes. And we're going to, we have our views file here in server. So we're going to define a function here. But for now, let's just do it's getting a little weird on me. Cool. So we're gonna do from dot import views, or actually, I think we can just do import views. Yeah. So and then we're gonna set this to views.home, and this will be a function that we make. And in here, basically what we're gonna want to do is, God damn it, Siri keeps going on. Basically what we're gonna want to do is just create a basic endpoint here. Super simple, just a Python function. We called it over here home, so we're gonna want to call this function home. And every kind of endpoint, for every, I guess, function in Django takes a request parameter. So we'll pass that in. And yeah, and we're just going to want to return a JSON response. Hello. We also have to add this parameter called safe equals false. Just don't worry about that. It's just because we're putting in a string rather than a Python dictionary. Like this thing will convert it to JSON, but a string isn't really like valid JSON, so it'll like have to do something interesting to conversion. Just don't worry about that. Just do safe equals false. So yeah, just to recap, what we did was we went into URLs, imported views, added this path, and then added this function here. So we're going to want to save both things. When we're editing files, we want to save it, which will like save it to our actual computer, not our like local computer, but save it to the server. And then we're going to want to rerun with this little refresh symbol over here. And that'll actually restart the application so that it reflects the new changes. So if we go over here, no module name views. I think I may have done the wrong import. Here, I'm gonna cheat, I'm not gonna lie. Just to make sure we're moving forward. Don't look at this GitHub repository. Don't look at it. Oh, yes. Yeah, so the problem I had here was we look at our thing. It's views is under Sosh server, so we have to do from server import views, not just import views, because it's at a different level. Save that, rerun it. So yeah, again, this button will save it, and then we want to rerun to restart it. And it takes a little while, but it gets done in like 10 seconds. There we go. So now you'll see that like it replaced this with hello world. And we're chilling. Now the thing is, if we're building kind of a like this kind of works to just type it into the browser here, but if you want to kind of simulate what you'll do when you're interacting with a React app, you want to actually call it as kind of an API call. So for that, we're going to use like a separate website, which will basically allow us to put different types of, like by default, when you put something in the browser, it'll just do a GET request, but there's different types of requests, and we can also pass in parameters when we're using like JavaScript. So for that reason, we're going to want to actually pull up a different website here.
There's a question in the chat about
apitester.com.
Armaan.
Basically, it's pretty simple. It just allows us to do kind of a similar thing, but instead of typing into the browser, we can like actually have some more details here, so we can do a post request, which hopefully you guys, I think, will have to learn different types of requests, because I know that they've learned some basic backend stuff.
Armaan, there's a question in the chat.
You guys learned like Node before this, or is this the first backend presentation?
Wait, Armaan, can you hear me?
You're shaking your head, but I can't hear you.
Wait, can anyone else hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
You guys can hear me, right? All right, I get it. She's not paying attention to me. I was asking a question, but all right, whatever. Have you guys learned how much like Django? Question in chat. Oh. Yeah, showing views again for like 2 seconds. Sure. Sorry about that. Where's views? Here we go. Yep. Sorry about that. Oh, everyone can hear you except me? Wait, what? Can someone else say something?
Hello? Can you hear me?
And you guys can hear that, but I can't? All right, all right. Why was this working earlier? I'm mad confused. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, say something, Vic.
Hello.
All right, cool. Is there some background noise right now, or?
No, you're good.
Cool. All right, sorry about that. Glad we were able to fix that though. Yeah, so what were you saying? Like, have they like, basically, okay, so I'll just give a short like recap. Just there's like different types of requests. You don't really need to worry about that, but basically like if we have a React application, we can kind of send this like server information, and we can send it like we want to get information, which is a GET request, in which case we don't really need any parameters, or a POST request. These are the only two types we're going to worry about right now, which is basically like put something on the database, like add some information. So think about like I don't know, like email, right? Email, like when you go load up your email, you're seeing all your new emails. Well, you're not modifying the data, you're just kind of looking at what you have. So that's a GET request. But when you go and actually send an email, that's like a POST request, because you're creating like a email object on the server and you're sending that, right? So, and that for that reason, like we'd want to send some actual data, right? So yeah, that's what we're going to worry about now, but that's what this API tester allows us to do. So it's literally the same thing as what we had over here. Like here, we had hello world for now. And then we're going to do get here. One sec. So yeah, and you can see same thing, hello world. We get some more information here, which is kind of useful, like the kind of request headers, response headers. Don't really worry about this right now, but there's just some kind of information about like how the request was sent and received. So yeah, cool. Vicky, do you want me to go over reviews again, or is that like a?
Wait, sorry. Did we address the previous question already?
Yeah.
Okay, sick.
Cool. Yeah, so that's what we have so far. But we're, this is not really a lot because, right now all we can really do, if you think about it, is just like have some, set in stone kind of information here. There's no like kind of sense of like state or like what is actually stored, right? Like when you go to Gmail or when you go to any website, like it's storing stuff on a database, right? You might have heard of like SQL, like it's a SQL database a lot of the times, right? So right now we haven't integrated with any kind of database. We're purely just like, taking a URL and then sending a kind of a coded in response. But if we want to actually be able to like have like a database and store information and then modify that information and have that shared amongst like a group of people, so that everyone, if you go to NewYorkTimes.com, like you get to access a server that everyone sees. We need to also like integrate with a database, right? If that makes sense. So that's what we're going to do next. Yeah, so let's go back to the slides. So views, just to kind of recap views overall, to get a better summary of it. It takes a request and returns a response. So here we have a request object here, and then we sent this response. Notice how like we're not really doing anything with the request, but like it has some information in it, and like in the next few steps, we'll like actually look at the request, and depending on what is in the request, we'll do different things. So that can be pretty helpful. And yeah, it's a dictionary of various information. So for example, get and post. Basically, like if we set this to get here, we'll see request, like request will then have a field in it that'll say we're a get response request, or if we put it to post, it'll say that it's a post response request rather. So that kind of allows us to like, the information we're putting over here reflects like in the code here. And then there's body, which is the actual data itself, which is important for a post request. So again, like we can go here and set it to post request. This is kind of our body, our post data. And if we view the body here, like whatever we put in here, we'll see it over here. And then there's some other stuff that's in here that's also useful, but we're not going to worry about that right now. And also, if you have any URL parameters, we'll see this in the next slide, but you want to like actually add those to the like URL or to the definition of the function. So, we have a function here, home, request, hello world, save equals false. That's like literally what we have right here, right? Basically, it's going to take this request in. It's not going to really look at the request at all. It'll just say like, no matter what the request is, just send a basic hello world response. But we can also, we can also look at the object ID. So like, for example, in this case, like the object ID is being passed in as a parameter. If we go back a few slides, remember like we can pass in an integer object ID to the URL path. And then this will allow us to kind of pull it out and do something with it. In this case, we're just going to say like get object and then what object did we get? So you can see like, if you were to go to, /object/3, then this would respond with getting object 3. Or if you plugged in 4, it'll do 4. So you can see like very basic, like, the ability to, depending on what you send the server, it'll respond differently. And we'll kind of get some more nuance into that in the future. Yeah. So hopefully that makes sense. I don't see any more questions right now. So yeah. So I kind of hinted on this before, but we're building this application. We need a server, right? Like, or we have a server. We need a database, right? Sure, you've heard this term database. Just a place where we store information. Hopefully, like you guys got a good sense as to why it's important. And now we're going to talk about how we actually do it. So I don't know how, I imagine that everyone in here is probably either taking 61A or has taken it. If you haven't, I don't think that they've gotten to SQL yet, but basically SQL is like kind of a type of database, and it allows us to store information. You can think about it like, here's a good image of it. It's like like an Excel sheet, right? Except we communicate with SQL rather than like clicking and dragging and like we do in Excel and in Google Sheets. it's code based because, obviously we don't want someone to manually like have to do that every time, every time you request a URL, you don't want some guy to have to like select the cell and, send it over, because obviously that's kind of defeats the point of technology. But like no one actually wants to like look at this code. It's kind of messy and gross. And like, we're learning Python here. Like I don't want to also have to learn SQL. I mean, I guess that's what you do in 61A, but like in this case, like let's not learn SQL. Like let's just deal with Python. And luckily Django provides a nice abstraction to all this stuff called models. So it's a Python abstraction for SQL commands. And it's very similar to what you guys should already be familiar with like object orientation. So it's like classes and objects, and we can kind of deal with data in our SQL database, just like it's very similar to a Python object. And in that sense, like it kind of simplifies it. We don't have to like learn this new SQL thing. And the Django, like it's the server itself will kind of handle like, okay, we made this change in the Python, so let me sync that over with the SQL. So it'll actually handle like making sure everything is consistent between the Python and the SQL, and we just have to worry about the Python, which is very nice. So it allows you to like create, get, and edit and delete objects. So you can create like a new object. You can retrieve it later. You can edit the fields. So like, take the Excel like row and change values in it, or you can just remove the row entirely. And then we can also like look at sets of objects and do like really powerful operations with sets. So we can like kind of query for a set, we can sort through the set or like filter. So like, just like you would an Excel sheet, like maybe you have like a list of transactions and you want to filter like all the transactions that happen between a few periods in time, or like all the transactions that I did or that Vicky did. In that case, you can kind of do some operations here. We're not going to really worry about too much of this stuff actually, but just so you get a sense as to like what all you can do with models, it's very powerful. Basically like model, like I'd kind of give the analogy of like a class or an object. Just like a class, we have to kind of define the fields that are in it. So like in a class, you'll define like, okay, if it's a dog, like what variables do we need? In this case, they're called fields, but you can kind of think about them like variables. And there's different types because, we are trying to abstract away the fact that it is SQL, but SQL does require that we like specify a type, and Django and Python doesn't. So for that reason, we kind of have to like create specific types of fields. Even though like in Python, you just, it's all dynamic typing, right? So there's different types of fields, kind of like different types in Java or in other languages, right? But one is called a char field. It's basically a string. You can think about it like that. The one difference is you'll see that there's kind of a limit to it because we are storing it in a database, so it kind of needs to know how much space to allocate to it. Don't like, we'll look at that later. Another one that we'll use is date time, which will store like a date time field, right? So like what day is it, what time is it, etc. Foreign key is interesting. It basically allows you to link different rows together. So you can imagine, we have an example in the next slide, but like you can imagine like you have a database of different classes that Berkeley is offering, and then you have different departments that are offering it. So you may have an object for the department, and then you want to link every class in that department to that department, right? So that'll allow you to then in the future, if you get a department, you can then filter by that department and just see all the classes that are in that department, right? So a foreign key essentially allows you to have relationships between different objects, kind of similar to like, if you have a class and that class has a variable that like the variable is another object, like it's similar to that, right? So that's like very powerful as well. And then ID is kind of an automatically generated field. It's just the integer of every object. Like, you can think about it like what the row number is in the table. So like the first object we add will be ID 0, then it'll be 1, 2, 3, etc. So this is kind of important for when we're querying for a particular object. We want to like know what the ID is, and then we can ask it like, hey, what is the data for this ID of this object? And it'll say, here's the information. And the nice thing is we can also include functions, which we'll kind of use. So like we can make a function that will like do some operation on the data in a particular row, and like we'll be able to like do something with that. So here's kind of some model definitions. It's not too complex, but you basically have your char field here. So like in this case, we actually did classes and subjects. So like for every subject, we may just want to store the name of it. So we'll allocate 120 characters, say that it can't be null, and then here's our char field. Null equals false basically just means like, will the code break if we try to pass in a null for this? So yeah, like that's what that is. You know, if you say null equals false, that means that if we try to make this field null, it's not a valid object. So like throw an error. And then here's like a more complex one. We have char field for the name of the class, a longer char field, like we set the thing to 960. So we have a little bit more space for the description of the class. You know, I hope that makes sense. Blank equals true is like a char field specific thing. I think it just means that this, if it is true, then the string can be empty. So like there's a difference between null and like an empty string, right? Like one is like nothing, and then one is just like no information, but it's still a string. And then subject, we have a foreign key relationship here. So like basically for every class, like what is the subject? And in this case, we can say null equals true. Like maybe, you know, if you're to, here's the thing, like there's different decisions you need to make depending on the needs. And this kind of, you know, goes into like, you know, when you guys work with clients, like, you know, you need to kind of work with them to understand like what are the needs of your application and like kind of define the models based on that. So if you're making the class system for Berkeley, right, you should ask them like, hey, like, is it possible to have a class that doesn't have a subject? Like, is that a thing that's possible? If they say, no, like that's a big problem, then you want to set null equals false, right? But if they want to say like, oh, actually there are some general classes that don't have like a specific subject, then you want to set null equals true, like in this case. So just, you know, you can kind of think about different cases in which you may want to react differently depending on what the needs are. And then, you know, here's a function here. This basically allows us to, we're going to do a query operation here, and we'll kind of look at the queries like in the next slide, but we'll like find the subject that has the same ID as the subject for this class and then get the name of it. So this is just kind of a function that allows us to, given the class, output the name of the subject. So we'll kind of play with this later, but we have different operations here that we can do once we've created models. So like here's first like creating a model, right? It's just as simple as defining like a Python class. So you know, class, okay, bad name because like Python class versus it's like a class that you take at Berkeley, but just ignore that. Like this, I'm talking about a class you take at Berkeley here. Name equals like physics, description equals, you know, this is description of physics, right? And then we're gonna save that. That's like the one kind of difference is that you have to actually do save. So it'll like, once you've edited the information, you have to save it to the database. And then we can do some queries here. So this will like class.objects at all will give you a list of all of the class objects, and it's just kind of like a list. So you can like look at each individual one. We can also do objects.get ID equals 0 or like ID equals 1, and that'll get us the 0th, 1th, you know, etc. class that we have in our database. Obviously, we may not have like, you know, if we only have one class in there, if we query for the 31st one, it's not going to output anything, so I'll throw an error. But you know, you can do this assuming it's like valid. And then, you know, you can get fields on it. So you'll notice that we have a name definition on this, on the class. Well, we can get class.name and then store that in a variable. So it's pretty nice. And then we can also, this shouldn't be uppercase, but we can also call the function. So subject name equals class.get subject name, which is a function we defined here, right? So hopefully you guys see that it's pretty similar to classes and objects in Python, but we kind of do something a little bit differently just because we are dealing with SQL, but it allows us to kind of act sort of similar. So yeah, so now let's kind of play with this, right? The example that I want to do here is like, imagine you're kind of like running your own blog and you have like different blog posts, right? So the first thing we want to do is like define our models. So we'll go ahead and open up the models thing here. So just to go over, let's just start from the root directory again. We're going under my site server, which is that app that we created. Remember, we ran the start app command. And then this is, you'll notice this is the same folder that has the views.py file that we were editing earlier, except this time we're going to edit the models.py file. Yeah, so here are our models. Oops, I'm actually going to copy over. Yeah. So here's kind of like the definition for like the class part. It's just class and then the name models.model. Let's go ahead and name this like post, right? So we want to create like a blog, right? We want to maintain a database of all the posts. That's kind of our goal here. Hopefully I don't see any more questions. So hopefully everyone's following along. So like, you can kind of think of different fields we may want. So we probably want like a title, right? So title equals, let me just check. So title equals models.char field. And then we want to specify the max length. Let's just give it, let's say like 50 characters, right? Null equals false. So we definitely want to give every post a title, but we probably also want some like information within the post, right? So let's give it like a description. Okay, I don't want to have to spell that word. Let's just call it content, and then we'll give it 200 characters. Null equals false. And then let's also give it like a date time field, because if we have a blog, maybe people want to see like when did I post this. So we'll do models.date time field. So yeah, just like how we would in Python, define an object, we're going to define some different fields here, and we're going to go ahead and save that. And the thing is, when we're dealing with a database, we do need to do a special command that'll kind of sync over the information like from the models and actually generate a server based on like what our specification is. So like a SQL server, like if you're making an Excel table, you kind of have to tell the Excel table like here's my kind of header, right? Like here's what fields I need. So we kind of have to do the same, just as a one setup step to be able to actually basically have like a server, right? So in order to do that, we're just going to run like another command in here, just to make sure we're all on the same page. We're going to go back to the home page here, dashboard. We're going to open up a bash console. We've already like created a bash console, so we'll just create one of the ones that we already have. And then yeah, so again, in this case, we're already in my site. So if you're not in this my site directory, just run cd my site. And then you want to be in the directory that has manage.py. So you'll remember earlier we ran manage.py start app server, which was a command that helped us create the app called server. There's another manage.py command called make migrations. So don't really worry too much about what this does. Okay, hold on. So there's one more change we need to do actually. Right now, our application or our project doesn't actually know that it needs to worry about this new server application that we created. It sees that it's in there, but it doesn't know that that's a part that we want to include in our logic right now. So all we need to do is I kind of hinted at it earlier, but there's that settings file, right? And I remember, hopefully you guys remember that I mentioned that there's an installed apps folder that will allow us to kind of include which apps we want to have. So we also need to add this new server one that we just created. So if we save this, so basically, again, my site settings, and we're just adding one line here called server, which is the same name as our app that we created earlier. So hopefully if we do this now, yeah. So now that it knows that the server is an app that we should look at, it says, oh, looks like I just created this new model here. Let me create a migration for it. So that'll migration is essentially, don't worry about it too much. Oops. It's not resizing. Oh, what the hell? It kind of got zoomed in. What the hell? All right, whatever. That was strange. So now this kind of tells it what changes have happened between the last kind of database that it's saved and the most recent kind of database schema. Zoom it back in a little for sure. How's that? Awesome. Yeah. So the next thing we want to do is just called migrate, and this will actually create our database. So now it's kind of running all of our changes. Zoom in here. So Samarth just privately messaged me, you're kind of hot. Honestly, Samarth, that's very inappropriate. We're running a meeting right now. But also kind of facts, let's be honest. So you'll notice that when we ran ls above, we had these 5 things here. And now that we've run this migrate function, this migrate command, we have this new thing called db.sqlite. That's our database. So like, cool, we just created a database. It kind of created it automatically. Yeah. So now that we have a database, we can start storing stuff in it. So we defined our model. We have our database here. And this thing's being really weird. Let me try to refresh it and hopefully it'll resize.
Wait, did you double tap your trackpad? Sometimes that zooms things in.
Yeah, but I tried pinching out, but now it works. I
Okay,
think I just refreshed it. Yeah, it like, because
okay.
it has to maintain its own like size in this thing. Like you'll notice if I go up here, it'll like resize it. So that's kind of what bugged it out.
Okay, for sure.
It's very strange. I don't know why it does that. But anyway, we fixed it now. So we defined this model here. We created a database. So great. Now let's do something with this. So it's going to be a little bit more complex now, but hopefully not too bad. We're going to go ahead and basically allow us to create a post. So we're going to copy this endpoint over. That's the nice thing about Django is like, it's just pretty intuitive. So you can kind of just copy and paste code. Like honestly, like once I made my first project, I just kind of started copying from there and every project was just a clone of that with modified code. So yeah, I mean, that's how coding works, right? Let's be honest. So we want to be able to create a post. And in order to do that, we're going to do a little bit more like logic on the request. So first thing, like when we create a post, remember I mentioned that if we are, again, bad naming, like post here, this is a different, like this doesn't mean like a blog post. This is just a type of request. So just when it's uppercase post, that does not mean the same as post. But we want to create a post, and the way we'll do that is we'll make a post request, bad naming, post request to this endpoint and give it some data, right? So, you know, the data that we had here was title, content, date time. Don't actually worry about date time. We can actually fill in fields on the server itself. So we'll actually allow the server to like figure out what is the current date time, but we'll just pass in the title. I'm just kind of mapping it out so you guys see, but we're not going to run this right now. Title equals Samarth is cool guy. Right? I think we can all agree upon this. You need double quotes, by the way, for some reason. But like, you don't really need to copy this right now. And then we have content, and that will be I love Samarth Goel. No relation, by the way. We just have the same last name. So yeah. So we want to create a post request and we'll pass in some data. So we're not brothers. If request.method equals post. So basically, if we pass, if this dropdown is post, or like in the case of when we actually implement it, we're not going to do this in here, but like if you guys are able to do it with React, if you guys do a post request with Axios, this will basically just say we'll only do something if it is a post request. And so if it is, what we want to do is basically this is like kind of JSON code here. So we need to kind of parse that out. So we'll import the JSON module, and we just want to get the data JSON.load s. That means like load as like it's a string of JSON. In this case, we'll just have request.body. So like I said, there's different things that are automatically kind of passed in this request here. One of them is the body of the request. So we'll kind of load it in, convert it from the string that it is passed in as into a Python dictionary. And then in the next step, we can kind of actually create a post object with that. So it's like post equals post title equals data title. Content equals data content. Yeah. So, and then we want to do post.save. And if this is successful and we don't run into any errors before this, we want to say created post, comma, let's just say this is a created post plus. So we'll just kind of print out as a response the title of the post we just created, just so we know, right? So let's save this, restart. But there's one problem, right? You'll notice that if you guys remember, like when I created this endpoint here, I also created a URL for it, right? But right now, this one doesn't have a URL defined for it. So if we try to, if we try to, like, what URL are we going to even run to be able to run this function, right? We haven't defined one. So we're going to actually go in and define this right now. Create post, and we're going to link that up with create post. Make sure we put a comma here. So now we should have a URL defined for this, and we should have a function defined for it, and we also define the models for it. Yeah, we're gonna just refresh, and remember the path here is actually, oh, we have to do a slash here actually. So if we have create post slash, let's try to create this post and see if this works. So yeah, just to recap everything, created this URL here, created this views, this information, and we have a model here. And yeah, we're gonna go ahead and run the test. Yeah, so, oh yeah, I think I know what this is. Yeah, okay, so there's one kind of complication here. We're just gonna kind of copy and paste this into the code. Don't really worry about what it means. Basically, there's some security thing that Django has right now, but we don't really care about security for the purposes of this particular thing. Like if you run this locally, you're not gonna have a problem, but it's just because we're running on this particular like Python Anywhere thing. So just, I'm gonna copy over something. Just, we wanna do this import statement. In fact, I'm gonna send this in the chat. That way you guys don't need to copy that all out because it's kind of long. And then all you have to do is do @csrf. So if you guys remember the decorator functions, we're just importing this kind of decorator. Jeff? You mean Geoff from Y Combinator? Oh, she means Geoff. Yeah. Yeah, gotta love Geoff. His name's Jeff though. So yeah, hopefully this will fix it. So yeah, honestly, like security, not important at all, right? Name error. Oh. Oh, that Jeff. Oh, Jeff Bezos. Yeah. Couple Jeffs in our lives, huh? So let's, nice thing is like we can kind of, it's a little bit jank, like, cause it's technically actually sending us HTML. So don't worry about that. Just search for error and then we'll kind of find until we find the error. Like you'll see Python stuff in here eventually. Post is not defined. Yeah, so basically the problem here is that we created this model, but we didn't import it over here, right? So just like any other class, we need to import it from .models import star. So if you guys remember the star import, it'll import every class that we have in there. Right now we just have one, so it doesn't really matter. But if we generally you want to have like one big models file that has like a ton of different definitions in it. So generally you just want to do from .models import star, and it'll kind of handle everything for you. Yep. So we're gonna run it one more time, and hopefully this time it'll work. taking a little minute. I'm confused. See, Smart, notice it says North Virginia, you know, running on AWS. Sure that you're a big fan of that. I'm mad confused, bro. Why is it not working? Try again. Oh, integrity error. What the hell? Not null constraint failed. Oh, not null constraint failed. Cool. We must have not filled in one of the fields. So title. I think the date time defaults to null. I think all the fields default to null equals false. So the problem here is we forgot to pass in the date time field. So if I do date time equals, we want to import from date time, import date time. For some reason, Python has like datetime as the function you need. Just do datetime.now, which will return the current timestamp. Save that, restart. There we go. We created the post. So now, we are able to create posts. Let's also just create one quick thing to be able to read the posts, and we will be done for the day. Again, little copy and paste action. Very nice. Request.method equals, we'll just do get, and then we don't want to create the post here. Also, we should call this list posts. We're just going to make a single one that'll list all of them. So what we're going to do here is posts equals post.objects.all. If you remember that, this will return a list of all the posts. And then one thing we're going to do is we want to be able to kind of turn it into a dictionary. Right now, like it'll essentially be just like raw Python data. We want to convert the class into a dictionary. And to that end, we will use this function built in called model to dict. So basically we'll just make a dictionary here, or essentially a list with dictionary in it. So for post in posts, we're going to say that the dictionary version of the post is model to dict. Now the one problem here is that the date time object for Python doesn't actually like work in JSON. So we're just gonna do post to dict equals, we're gonna set the date time to the string of the date time. So we're just gonna convert it to a string. That way it doesn't like yell at us. It's kind of annoying, but that's kind of what we have to do. And then we're just gonna add to the dictionary. So we're just gonna, every time for every post, we're gonna turn it into a dictionary, do this little thing to convert the date time to a string just because that's what JSON expects, and then add it to this list. And then instead of returning here, we're gonna return to dict. So this would return a list of all of the data in our database. So let's try this endpoint. I'm actually just gonna open a new tab here, get posts, nice. Okay, the one thing is we actually, again, like if you guys remember, when we created this, we had to create a URL. When we created this, we had to create a URL. We just created this new one, got to create another URL, right? So go over here, list posts, list posts. Cool. Save this, restart. Hopefully you guys are kind of picking up on like the patterns between like URLs and views and stuff. I hope that makes sense. So list posts. And let's hope this works. Oh, content type error. Oh, looks like we put in the, oh, it's just because we need to put a slash here, I think. Yeah, it's a little bit jank, this thing. Oh, yeah, the problem was that I didn't have a comma, right? It's a list of things, and you got to put a comma between every element. Let's try this now. Yeah. Still throwing the error. Oh, it's because I put in the wrong, it's the wrong domain as well. This is because I was running through this earlier on a different account, so I could kind of try to make this as smooth as possible. So I got to switch over to this one. But there you go. We have a list of all of the posts. We only create one post, if you remember. So we only have this, but let's, now we have this like amazing website, right? Like we have this domain, like let's use it, right? So let's create a new article. Vicky is lame. Honestly, I'd prefer Smart, right? Again, it's very important that the database only reflects like reality. So it's very important that we put this kind of information in. Boom, created post, Vicky is lame. And then the field is kind of limited, so just hit view raw to see the full thing. So this little button here, view raw. And boom, you'll see we have one post called Samarth is a cool guy, one post called Vicky's lame. So, I mean, this is the source of truth here at at WebDev, for like what the reality is. So I'm actually gonna I sent the URL to you guys. So if you guys ever need a reference like who's cool and who's lame, that's the URL. You can click right there and you'll get a full list of, just kind of the information on the status of your club here. So yeah, that is a short little demo presentation. I know we went about 10 minutes over. I actually had like a lot more stuff that we could go through, but we're just gonna, I think, just kind of cut it here, just to, this is kind of meant to give you guys a sense of how Django works, but some of the complexities, you guys can kind of learn on your own and stuff like that. Yeah. So we have a couple more slides. So like, some more things you can do if you want to learn more about Django and kind of want to build off of what we did here is, try deleting and editing posts, try like adding different categories and stuff. We go until 9. I mean, realistically, okay, let me do a little bit more. I'm not going to do, I planned on having like model relationships and doing like categories, but I'm just going to do like a little bit more okay, like think about this, right? For sure. Let's just do like one more thing and then we're going to call it, right? So, but yeah, appreciate the heads up, Vic. Let's create another path just called get post. So like, let's say like, right now we're just getting like a full list of the posts, but if we just want to get a single one, we'll create one called get post. And this will allow us to kind of take advantage of like our URL parameters, right? So like get post, right? Well, like which post are we getting? Like if we just do /get post, we don't know which one, right? If we create a post, that's kind of clear because there's nothing exists. We just create one. We list the post, that will list everything so that we don't need to specify anything. But for get post, like we kind of want to know which post we're getting, right? So here we're going to create this parameter here, int ID. So this is the type, and then this is the like name of it. And on the function that we're going to create, so we need to create that here too. Let's save this. We want to create a get post function. Well, it needs to know what the ID is, right? So we're going to, just like we called it ID there, we're going to call it ID over here. And yeah, so instead of getting all the posts, like let's just get a single post, right? So we'll do objects.get ID equals ID. So this will, instead of getting all of them, it'll just get the singular post, and it's not plural. We'll remove the S. And then let's just convert it to a dictionary and return that dictionary. So super simple. Like here we created a list, and then this one will just allow us to do a single one. So you can imagine like, like think about, I gave the example like New York Times website, right? So use the same example, right? When you go to the like headlines page or like the main page, you'll see like a bunch of different articles, and each one of those is a different article like in the database, right? It's going to query like what are 10 most recent articles, like display the kind of brief information on those. And then when you click on a particular article, you're just viewing that information, you're seeing like the full data. So, like, right now, like, it'll just return the list here, but like, let's say we just didn't, let's see, remove key from dictionary. Just to make this like a more realistic example. Cool. So like, let's say like if we're running this blog, like we don't want them to see the description yet. We just want them to see the titles. So we'll just remove content, and then we'll only have it here, just to make it really realistic. So like, when you see the overall blog page, you'll see when it was posted and what the title is, and then you have to click on an individual blog to see the content within it. So hopefully that makes sense. So basically what we did is we created, we want to call this get post. So we have our list of posts, which will return all of the individual or all of the posts. And then if we see a post that we're interested in, we'll click on that, and that'll be kind of represented as this other get post thing. So let's just try this, and then I can kind of explain. Hopefully it'll make more sense when I actually demonstrate what it looks like. Yep, so let's try to run this. See if we have any errors. Left the name is mydict. Let's see. I think I fixed that. I think I noticed that and fixed it. But yeah, Ansa, do you think I fixed it, or do you think it's still broken? In the top one, list posts. Oh, you're right. Nice. That was a great catch. Someone's paying attention. I love it. Yeah. Cool. So we do have an error here. Again, let's kind of search for error. A little bit strange, but return none instead. Yeah, so like this kind of gives you some basic information, but it doesn't necessarily give you everything. So for like the full information, we're actually going to go to like there's a particular page on here. If you go, so we're in the dashboard again, we're going to click on web, and then we'll click on error log. And this will give us kind of a full list of all the errors. So let's see. I think it's literally just a comma that I missed. Yeah, right here. So like for some reason, this doesn't give you everything, but this is kind of like a more like what you're familiar with. Like, if you get a Python error, it says invalid syntax, it points right there. We'll go to that line, we'll see, oh, well, there wasn't a comma there. So that's probably why it threw an error. Refresh that. So, I mean, that's the nice thing about having Django. Like, you guys are probably all familiar with the syntax, and like the same rules apply here, right? Even though it's, we're using Python to make a web framework instead of to make, Hog project. The same syntactical rules apply. taking a minute. Refresh the log. Oh, I think it's because we need to end with a slash here. For whatever reason, I think there's a setting that's on right now that requires it ending with a slash, and I believe that's what's throwing it. Generally, like, if we go here, like, it doesn't end with a slash, so that's kind of like a small problem, but I think it's just a small change to fix that. So yeah, generally you don't want it to have to end with a slash because that's just kind of weird. I'm pretty sure I saved this, so. Yo, it's kind of tripping, I'm not gonna lie, because I have a slash right there, so. Like, I don't know, it says there's no slash there, but then there's a slash there, so, strange. Maybe this fixed it. Maybe I just didn't save the first time, I don't know. This is so strange. Does anyone catch like what's wrong there? It's just a basic syntax error. I'm so confused. Let me try copying over a source of truth. That's the same thing. Okay, so here's the problem. Okay, it was actually because I was running I was running a post request on this URL get post, but if we look at it, we're actually only supporting get requests right now. So what we should have done is done like else, there's some kind of technique, we kind of want to filter the data a little bit. We want to do a little bit of data cleaning. So generally what you actually want to do is do like return JSON response, like must be a get request, right? Whatever it is, right? That way, like it'll still return something. We're not gonna worry about that right now, but that's like definitely kind of important, right? Is just think about like, in any class, you want to do a little bit of data cleaning, right? Or like, when you've done projects for 61A, I think that they probably have like a little bit of like, if you give a weird input, right? Like let's say they say that the input is going to be a string and you actually pass in a dictionary. Well, you want to like make sure that it's not a dictionary, right? In this case, if we say that we're doing a post request and we only support a get request, it's going to kind of error out. So let's just switch this to get for now, and it should be fine. But yeah, definitely like kind of shows you like some of the things that I am not including in this just for sake of time is like, a lot of the technicalities. But yeah, you can see we can get this gets us the full details of a post. If we go back here, remember I kind of removed out the some of the information. So right now we, think about like, New York Times website again, if we'll only see like a title and the date time on this page, but then if we want to view like, okay, Vicky's lane, like that's very interesting. Like I want to learn more about that. then I can go to this particular URL, and then I should get the full information. So, oh, it's the wrong endpoint. Hold on. That was my other website. So yeah, so we see Vicky is lame, and then here's some content that we didn't see earlier. Honestly, I'm pretty smart. So yeah, so there's some examples there. We got through like a good amount of it. There's some other stuff that's like more advanced, like the foreign key relationships that you guys can look in the GitHub repository for. The code isn't quite identical to what it is here because like I'll actually save this, and if you guys want that version too, I'll save this version. I can have them send them both out, or I'll update the slides with it. But that version also has like some more complex stuff. So like I'll just actually just show you the code, just so you get a high level of it. I'll just show you the models file. So we have the post model that we defined here, but we actually also have this category, and we have a foreign key relationship between the post and the category. So we can say that this post is in the category of, like, I don't know, let's say you have like a tech blog, right? Like, you know, if you have a category where you talk about like Apple, the category where you talk about React programming, one where you talk about like startups that you're interested in, you can have different categories, and the post can link to a category. So this is kind of the, you know, hopefully gives you a sense of some of the stuff we didn't touch. And a lot of the power like of Django is like, you know, when you start building up these relationships, right? And you have a lot of different data that's connected to different other data, and you can query in like very smart ways. You know, you can really build like really complex applications. So, you know, Django, you could pretty much build Facebook, like a Twitter, any application that you're familiar with. Maybe not to the same scale, but like the actual like core functionality you could definitely reproduce. But it may not scale as well just because they have different things that are faster in certain ways. But yeah, so again, like what's next? You know, try maybe this foreign key stuff, right? Look at some of the documentation, try to understand that. Look at things like some things we didn't support is like, okay, what if you want to delete a post? What if you already posted something, you want to edit it? Things like that. Or like, what if you have some other information you want to store, such as like the author information, thumbnail, like maybe author can be its own model, right? If you're not only running a personal blog, but you're running a blog for several different editors, you know, maybe they need to all have their own accounts, and you can click on their name to see all the posts that they've personally made. And then also, you know, think about connecting with a React front end. You know, that's kind of what you're doing here in web dev, right? So maybe try to like make a front end for it, and you can actually have a fully functioning like blog post website where you can post things and people can view it, right? And you know, you would use Axios for that if you want to actually see. Yeah, and there's some other advanced concepts like, you know, connecting to other types of databases, URL, query string parameters, Django REST framework. Like I kind of did sort of a jank like REST API thing here. But if you're really building like a really large API that you want to communicate like lots of different types of data to a database, we want to use something called Django REST framework, which will kind of make a lot of the JSON like operations we were doing earlier a lot smoother. But I didn't want to like bring that in here just because it's like it's a lot of upfront work for like long-term payoff. Of course, especially if you're interacting with React, like you're gonna have to deal with some CORS issues. It's not like really an advanced concept, but it's just kind of something you'll have to look at. It's like a one-time fix, but it can be kind of annoying to play around with. I won't really tell you too much about that now, but yeah. And then some resources. The two links we used here today are pythonanywhere.com and API tester. So hopefully you guys have, to some extent, a functioning website on pythonanywhere.com, and then you use the API tester to test it. We also have the code from today. Like I said, this is actually code that I prepared, but if you guys are, you know, if you guys want the code that I actually like physically wrote today, I'll put that on GitHub as well. Django documentation is pretty nice. And then some example code, like here's a GitHub repository of different projects that like I've worked on that have good example code. Like I personally have sent this to a lot of people and like pointed out particular line numbers to look at when they're building stuff. So maybe you'll find use out of that. Like there's a lot of complexities to it because it is like actual code for like actual projects. So you may not understand it all, but just in case you want it. And then there's my email. Like if you guys want to learn more about this or just want to chat, like just feel free to hit me up over email, and I'm happy to help out. And yeah, I mean, we're at time. So I apologize that we didn't have like time in the meeting to ask questions, but I'm willing to stay here for a little bit and we can go through any questions you guys might have. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed it.
Woo! Beautiful. Amazing. Best presentation
What?
ever.
The little woo really sent me. That was very funny.
Good stuff. Yeah, feel free to, I mean, I'll just chill here, ask any questions in chat. I can show any like code or anything that
You should talk about cores. No, I'm kidding.
I can.
No,
Cross origin.
you don't live in Illinois.
Cross
I do. Only I can talk.
cross origin. Okay.
All right, they'll left.
Now that really
Corns.
gone.
But I just said corn. And I was like, no, it's my thing.